with the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh. It's Science Tonight. Now here's your host, Chris Smith.
Hey everybody, good evening. Welcome to Science Tonight. Glad that you could be here. I am your host, Chris Smith, and I'm so glad that all of you have joined us this Thursday night once again for another great episode of Science Tonight, because tonight really is going to be, I think, a great show. We've got a great guest. We're going to play a fun, quirky little game here at the top of the show. And of course, a little bit later in the program, we're going to take your questions. So as we go throughout the program, as we go throughout the interview, make sure that you're leaving questions, comments, thoughts into the chat box, whether you're watching here on YouTube or over at the museum's Facebook page. We'll be collecting those to pose to tonight's guest. Now, tonight's edition of Science Tonight is a special program because right now at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, we are smack dab in the middle of Reptile and Amphibian Days. It's been a week-long celebration of probably some of the coolest critters on the planet: reptiles, amphibians, snakes, turtles, tortoises, frogs, toads, all of those kinds of animals. We've been hearing from guest experts, lectures, doing crafts, yoga, all related to those animals. And it's been a lot of fun. People have been learning a lot for sure. This has been an amazing week full of stuff to do. And this is not the last one. There are more presentations and activities tomorrow and Saturday. So make sure that you visit naturalsciences.org, the museum's website, in order to see what's coming up on the schedule, sign up and get the links to participate. You can also just subscribe to the museum's YouTube channel right here and click the little bell that's next to that button to get notified when we go live. And you'll make it to next week's edition of Science Tonight next Thursday. You'll also get notified when we do the next Reptile and Amphibian Days programs. So it's a win-win-win all the way around. You win, they win, we all win. The reptiles and amphibians win. It's a lot of fun. But for tonight's program, since we are in such a special week, we went out and found a fantastic expert, a herpetologist in a way. Yes, I'm seeing like, yeah, definitely a herpetologist. An expert on gopher tortoises. Yes, gopher tortoises. And an expert on science communication and protecting wild places. She's the director of communications for WildLandscapes International. Everybody, please put your hands together and welcome Amanda Hips. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to be on the show tonight. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think I oversold it at all. I first became familiar with some of the research that you were doing in your work with reptiles and amphibians like gopher tortoises from a little science podcast called Ologies, and then started following you on social media, where you talk a lot about the research that you've done with tortoises and your continuing work. And wow, there's just so much cool stuff happening around these animals in particular, but also about wild lands conservation.
That's true. Yes, you're right. Yeah. How do we dig in? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, the way that we normally get started is I like to try to have a little bit of fun right at the top of the show, do something just kind of fun and quirky, and then we dive into the science. So it's something not so serious, and then we do some serious science. So if you're up for it, I have a little trivia game that we can play. That is, I'll say, loosely based on your expertise on gopher tortoises. I'm curious if you're familiar with this term, gophers.
I'm not.
Oh,
gophers.
Fantastic. Okay, I was hoping this was the case. So you're an expert on gopher tortoises. So tonight we're going to play a game I'm calling Go for Gophers. Gophers is the medieval French term for waffles.
Oh, really?
Medieval French term for waffles dates to the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries. So guess what? 3 trivia questions just for you about waffles. Are you ready to play?
This is exactly right up my alley. I'm ready.
Are you a big waffle fan?
I am a big waffle fan. I don't
Let's-
know the history of waffles though. So.
Well, let's see what you know. Okay. In 1740, Gophers à la Flamande was the first French recipe to use which of these ingredients? Revolutionized the world of waffles. Was it yeast, egg whites, or a pound of butter?
Am I allowed to call on the audience or call a friend for help if I need it?
Absolutely. Let's see what's happening over here in the chat real quick. See what they're thinking about.
I'm thinking B.
You're thinking B, egg whites?
But I want to know what everybody else is thinking.
Let's see. I think it might take folks a minute to jump in on this one.
That's all right. I think let's go with B.
We're going to go with B, egg whites. The correct answer is...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Ah.
It's actually yeast. Yep, it's the yeast.
Right.
But no problems there. You still got two more.
Okay.
This one's true or false.
How do I win?
50-50 shot. What do you win? We put you in the Science Tonight Hall of Fame.
Okay, that's good enough.
All right, next one. In 1972, Nike co-founder Bill Bowerman was inspired by and then actually used a waffle iron to mold Nike's Waffle Trainer running shoe. True or false?
Whoa.
What do you think?
That seems a little too off the wall. I'm going to go with false.
So you think the waffle, which part do you think is, I'm trying to trip you up on here. Is it the waffle trainer?
Okay.
Is it the using the waffle mold, the waffle iron?
I'm the waffle mold. I think it's the iron. Yeah. That seems
Actually using the waffle iron?
Yeah.
This one surprised me too. This is true.
Oh, come on.
I know it.
Really?
I'm so, check it out. But what about this, right? Gophers. There you go. Gophers have something to do with Nike tennis shoes. You can tell people that now. Yeah, this was an interesting story when I read about it. The guy was like actually eating waffles and thought, you know what, if we flip this waffle inside out and we put the spikies facing into the ground, or instead of the dimples in a waffle, then you've got a good gripping running shoe. And so he actually broke his waffle iron because he just poured straight urethane into it and it sealed the thing shut. But that was how the first like real Nike athletic running shoe was invented, breaking a waffle iron.
That's pretty wild. That is wild. I would have never guessed. Okay. All right. I've got one more.
One more.
I got to get this right.
Got to get this one right. Here you go. Eggo frozen waffles were originally marketed under which name? Dimpled pancakes.
Is the answer already there?
Did I? Oh, you can ignore that or not. It's your choice.
Okay.
There's a slide after this one. Or Froffles.
Oh, it's got to be Froffles. It's green, right?
It is. Yeah, it's Froffles. It's Froffles. Apparently, my graphic design skills we're lacking tonight. Yeah, it's Froffles. Portmanteau for frozen waffles.
Okay, I got one right, but I don't think that was a fair one.
You know what?
Froffles. That's a pretty good name.
Isn't Froffles? I don't know why they chose Eggo over Froffle.
Why would they change it? Yeah.
Froffle is such a great name.
Froffles is so much better. Yeah.
Well, that.
Yeah, I don't get.
So I gave you the last one, but that still counts in the rules of Science Tonight trivia. So everybody can give Amanda a round of applause for getting one right tonight at Science Trivia. So I was terrible at that game. So we should probably talk about something that is much more in your wheelhouse and get away from waffles and talk about gopher tortoises. That's what we're really all here to learn about tonight.
Good.
Learn about reptiles.
Waffles is a good way to start this. Okay, I love it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Amanda, get us started. Tell us a little bit about what you do and and how you got interested in gopher tortoises to kick off.
Sure. So it's kind of a long, twisty, turny story, I think. I got interested in gopher tortoises when I was working at the Jacksonville Zoo. I was doing an internship during my undergraduate career, and I was kind of gearing my education towards vet school and thinking that I knew that I wanted to work with wildlife. I was really interested in conservation, but I just wasn't really aware of like the science field. I don't think that I was really, I'm not sure if it was like the lack of representation for women, but I just didn't feel like being a wildlife biologist was something I could do. It wasn't even really something I considered. So I kind of geared my entire education to go to vet schools so that I could maybe be a zoo vet or somehow work with wildlife in that sense. And working at the Jacksonville Zoo, I was working with gopher tortoises and the wildlife rehab department. And so I was dealing with like a lot of other native wildlife species in Florida, but gopher tortoises is what we were primarily seeing. Most of the wildlife that was coming in was dropped off by people who probably saw a gopher tortoise on the side of the road, potentially on accident hit them with their car. And so that was really a lot of what I was rehabbing at the time. And I wanted to learn more about gopher tortoises. I hadn't really had a lot of experience with them. And so I started reading about them and some of the issues and realizing that, their habitats are declining and they're kind of running out of space. And there's all these fragmented habitats. And so I started learning about them. And then I realized that I had a professor at UNF where I was going to school who studied them. And so I just sent him an email one day, and then I ended up meeting and walked into his office and said, hey, how can I get involved with gopher tortoise research? And so that's where it all took off. And eventually decided this was all while I was applying to vet school. And so at that point I was kind of like, I'm really enjoying being in the field and doing field work. I had no idea this was like an option. And so I decided to drop vet school. I did get accepted, and then I just kind of turned it down. And I ended up going for my master's and also continuing my work with gopher tortoises. And at that point, I was, for my undergraduate, I was studying their reproductive success. And I was kind of like going around and like looking for gopher tortoise nests and figuring out, how many of them are going to hatch. And then for my master's, I started looking into the animals that use their burrows. And so they're called commensals. And gopher tortoises will dig these long, extensive burrows. So they can get up to, I like to tell people, like, imagine the length of a large school bus. They can get longer than that. They can get, over 40 feet, depending on the habitats that they're in. So, so a lot of animals are using these burrows also to escape weather, hot days, cold days, fire. Florida habitats are really dependent on fire. And so they're using these like burrows for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's just a place for them to go feed. So there's certain animals that will use burrows, like the Florida mouse, for example, is a small rodent. It's endemic to Florida, and it actually has sort of co-evolved with the gopher tortoise to use their burrows. And that's where they live. They'll dig side tunnels within gopher tortoise burrows. And then you might find snakes using the burrows because potentially they're after food sources like the Florida mouse or whatever other small animals might be using it. And so that's where I took my project. And so my thesis is completely on gopher tortoises and the animals that use their burrows. And some of those are also insects. And so it was just a huge study, a wide range of wildlife that I was able to like work with and document. And it was really exciting project.
Wow, that
might have been the long story. I'm sorry.
No, that was brilliant. I mean, what an incredible story. I love the seeing injured gopher tortoises, and then you learn a little bit about them and realize, what the sort of bigger problems are, and then saying, I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, I kind of started realizing, like rehab is really important, but it wasn't really the solution. It's not the solution. It can help an individual animal, but it's not helping gopher tortoise populations. And I wanted to, be part of the bigger picture and try to, figure out how can we get to the bottom of this? How can we, prevent them from getting hit by cars? Because most of the time they're not even making it. There were some instances where we
Mhm.
could eventually rehab. It's a long process. Put their shell back together if it had been damaged and release them eventually. And so there were some cases, but again, most of them were dying, and it was just a really difficult situation to be in. But I was like, we need to fix the problem and not, like rehab's great, and I love that we're helping these individual animals, but this is going to be a species that disappears if we don't do something about it.
So tell me a little bit about gopher tortoises then. You mentioned like the size of their burrows, but where can people find gopher tortoises? Uh, what are they doing in their environments? How do they fit into their ecosystems?
Really good questions. So, gopher tortoises are these upland creatures. So, they need high, dry habitats a lot like people do, because we want to build our homes and, develop on high, dry land. We really can't put a house in a swamp. I guess you can, but, typically you'd have to drain it. And so, the primary places that we want to develop are already high and dry habitats. And that's also where gopher tortoises have to live. Because they're digging these burrows, they go underground. So it needs to be, they can't hit the water table. They can't burrow in a swamp. And so they're living in these habitats that are like Florida scrub habitats, they're flatwoods, sandhill type habitats. And their habitats are also really dependent on fire because they need this like open habitat, open canopy, and sandy soils so that they can dig the burrows, and areas where it's sunlit so that they can thermoregulate or dig their nests in a sunny area. Um, so those are the kind of habitats that they're living in, and as I mentioned, they're also really important for people too. So um, yeah,
So yeah, it's
I
kind of
guess
setting up a conflict too there.
what's that?
So that's kind of setting up the conflict there too with uh, what gopher tortoises need is pretty similar
Right.
to what people need.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so that is like the primary problem. So at this point in Florida, especially in South Florida, where just habitats that are really disappearing pretty quickly, and there's just a lot of development happening in Florida. And so their habitats are just becoming these very isolated islands. And so they're kind of not really able to travel in between, or, um, a lot of them are even getting relocated. And so in the past, we were able to, by law, actually build on top of them. And so they didn't have to be relocated. We could just bury them in their burrows. And that's since changed,
Really?
luckily, so that now they can get relocated. But it's a long process, and they have to. So if you were to just take a tortoise from one habitat and put it into another habitat that maybe even looks like it's better habitat for them, maybe it's a larger area, maybe there's more tortoises, and it looks like they'd thrive better there. They actually don't stay. So imagine these animals that are old, like they can live upwards of 60 years, and they're growing up in this one location. They're not going very far, and they get to know all of the tortoises around them. We tend to think that reptiles are not social creatures, but they are. They do have, family, I don't want to say family units, but they do have units where they're socializing and mating. And so we're just now discovering, some of these like social behaviors, and they're all really exciting, and also very sad to think about when you're relocating these animals and they don't want to stay. They want to look for home again. So if you plop them down in another location, they're going to try and wander and look for home. And, they might either be like looking for their previous burrow, or where they came from, or they might be looking for resources because they're just really not familiar with the new habitat. So the process of relocating, you have to put what we call a soft release. And so we put up a fence in this new habitat and help them kind of dig a starter burrow and keep them there for years until they like just accept it as their home. And then you can remove the fence. But it is like a very long process. And yeah, so, ideally it would be just ideal to not have to relocate in the end. It would be really nice if we could just protect their habitats and leave them where they are. And that also goes for the commensal species, the animals that are living with them in their burrows. We don't even really think about them very often when we're relocating, but those animals are also depending on the gopher tortoises. So it's really difficult to think about that and relocate, all the animals that are also using the burrows. And it's really not the best situation for them.
So tell me a little bit about how you study gopher tortoises, like what the work on the ground looked like, what the field work was, because I imagine trying to cover a gopher tortoise burrow that's as long as a school bus to try to figure out what the tortoise is doing and then what all the other critters living there doing probably wasn't easy.
No, yeah. So I had to come up with so many different methods to survey burrows, just because different species are gonna be identified differently. And so, for example, when we were looking for vertebrates, my two ways of tracking them was to use trail cameras. So basically just set up a camera that could be motion activated in front of the burrow and just find out what's coming and going in and out of those burrows. And then the other way that I did it was I used what's called a burrow scope. So it's kind of like if you envision those scopes that you can send down like a sink, if there's a clogged sink and it has like a camera at the end and you can see it on a screen. So it's a lot like that, but it's larger and it's going down, relatively large burrow. And that one wasn't really quite as effective because it spooked the animals. And so if there was a mouse or a snake or whatever, there's so many side tunnels within the gopher tortoise burrow that they're gone. Once they know something's coming down, like they disappear. And so I wasn't really using that camera wasn't effective, but the trail cameras were great because I don't have to be there. They can, you're observing behavior and being able to like figure out how they're using the burrow and what aspects of it are important to them. So that was one way. And then for insects, I was also surveying everything I could find. And so insects, some of them are coming out at night, some are coming during the day, some are relying on the tortoise feces. So I had to, dig through poop, through gopher tortoise poop, and a lot of it was just like trying to scoop the poop out from the end of the burrow, and then just digging through it and seeing what I could find in there. And I came up with very odd methods, which like reflecting on it is kind of awkward to talk about, but I took some pantyhose and I would take like fresh gopher tortoise poop and put it in the pantyhose and tie it on a stick like outside of the burrow, toss it in. And so that would keep the poop like moist and fresh longer. And then hopefully it would just serve as like a trap for insects that wanted to use it. And so that was effective. And then just
creative.
Sifting. And yeah, I had to get creative. And I was just excited to find, anything I could. So these are like, a lot of these insects are insects that like very few people have ever seen. We don't really know much about them. Like they're very specific to gopher tortoise burrows, and they might be reducing parasite loads from gopher tortoises. So they're eating poop inside of the burrow, and they, eventually they're basically cleaning. They're basically like a cleaning service for gopher tortoises, and reducing parasites. And so they're kind of important, like that's an important ecosystem service. And yeah, it was just exciting to be able to like track that. Like nobody had really tried to look for them in the locations that I was working in Southeast Florida. And so it was really exciting. Yeah. Like coming up with all these different methods. It was like, just, I don't know, so much fun. It was like, it sounds so silly, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get to you get to be so creative with the methods. Nobody's done it before, so you get to kind of invent how to do it. And
Exactly.
I mean, it seems like they would just be cool and interesting animals to work around, like to visit a gopher tortoise burrow, and Frank is hanging out in the burrow today, and you get to
Oh
hang out
yeah.
with Frank for a minute, I guess. I don't know. Was it
It's
like
so
that?
true.
Maybe
Oh my
did the gopher tortoises run and hide,
God.
or were they cool with it?
Oh my gosh. So they're all like such different personalities. And so some of them were, terrified. And so I had to be careful. Like I didn't want to, stress any of the tortoises out. And so if I knew that they were going to be a little bit stressed, I tried to do it really quickly. But, and sometimes I would just like abandon ship if I felt like they were stressed out. Other tortoises were, and this is also kind of related to stress too. And so I had to be careful, but, some of them were angry, like very defensive. I wouldn't say
Oh,
angry, but they were defending their home. I actually have a video that I could show. Am I able to share screen? Let's see. Yeah. Here we
I
go.
hope so, because I'd
So we
love to see an angry gopher tortoise.
she's so cute. We had a couple females. It seemed that most of the females were not, I don't want to say most of them, but in general, like the defensive tortoises tended to be females. And that could have been because they were defending a nest or what have you. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Let's see, I've got it here. I've actually got two of them. So here is one of them. So I hadn't even started work, but she came out of her burrow and just started head bobbing, which is a common defensive behavior. And so this head bobbing is just her telling me to get off her property. Like, this is my burrow, get off my property.
Oh, wow.
So that was a little bit of a charge there.
Very menacing.
Yeah, very, yeah. So some of them would bite. It was very uncommon. It wasn't very common for them to be biting, but occasionally they would bite my feet or, whatever they could get to. And I have one more here too. This one's Grumpy Gertrude. And there's a Nat Geo article written about her. Bethany Aguilar is a colleague of mine. She's a science communicator, and she had come out in the field with me one day and met Grumpy Gertrude. And she decided to write a Nat Geo article on her and her head bobbing. And so there is a video of her online. If you Google Grumpy Gertrude, the gopher tortoise, it'll come up and you can read about her. But this is a different video. This isn't the same video that was on Nat Geo. This is just to get an idea of what she's like. She just was really, anytime you were close by, you didn't even have to be near her burrow. She would come after people. So she was just, in general, just didn't want people around the field site. So it really didn't matter where we were. But she was a unique character, and sometimes it wasn't always aggression. It was like she was just interested in checking stuff out. So if we had field equipment around and we weren't even near her burrow, but she saw us, she would still she'd walk over and check stuff out. And so it was pretty cool to just see like different behaviors. Some of them are terrified. Most of them don't want anything to do with you. And they'll just retreat further into their burrow. But there were a select few that, felt that they owned the field site and they were going to defend it with their life. So yeah, it was interesting. It was really nice to be continuing at these field sites for 3 years and really getting to know a lot of these tortoises. So it was really, really awesome.
That is amazing. Grumpy Gertrude, everybody. Round of applause for Grumpy Gertrude.
Google
Gertrude.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So okay, so I'm on the gopher tortoise train now for sure. How did you get? Yeah. Check. So how did you take then this knowledge of gopher tortoises and work that into bigger conservation strategies? Was there a moment when you saw a building go up on top of tortoise habitat, you said, all right, let's do something about it? Or, well, I don't know. What's the story there?
I wish I had a heartwarming story, and I don't. Really, what I wanted to do was bring attention to some of the insects initially. So, gopher tortoise insects, some of that we know that there's 13, maybe 14 species of invertebrates that are fully reliant on gopher tortoises, but nobody really has, there are a select few people that have worked with them, two that are alive currently. And so I just was like, how come we don't know more about these animals? And, gopher tortoises are getting a lot of conservation attention in Florida. I think that we're on the up and up with conservation for gopher tortoises. It's looking good. I don't mean that we're there. I think we're just moving forward in a very good way with them. And I just didn't really understand why we didn't really know much about these insects, because it seems like they could potentially be important for gopher tortoises too. And so gopher tortoises are getting relocated. These insects are not. And I think it would be really challenging to do that. And so I think I just wanted to bring attention to the insects. I had worked with gopher tortoises for 4 years before I really started even thinking about them. And so I think a lot of people just weren't. I just don't think that we were thinking about them. And so I wanted to bring attention to them. And that's really why I took to Instagram and social media to start talking about it. And in the process, most of the work was, I saw gopher tortoises every day in the field. And so of course I wanted to talk about them because, they're just incredible creatures. So I think I just sort of wanted to lure people in to be excited about these invertebrates, but like using gopher tortoises as the hook. So sort of just,
Okay. So instead
to be interested and excited.
So instead of getting on the gopher tortoise train, I should be getting on the gopher tortoise burrow commensals train. Well,
they're all on the same train. So.
And there it is. That's, of course. That's the point right there.
Yeah.
Right. That's the actual point right there. Well, so in that case, tell me a little bit about some of these invertebrate friends of gopher tortoises. Because now I know nothing. We're totally into unknown territory now. For me and probably, I would imagine a lot of viewers tonight too.
So let me show you some pictures. They are not necessarily like the most beautiful of insects, but I think that for me, it was just fascinating to be able to like see them and take photos of them and share that, because most people have never seen, like there aren't very many photos of these animals, and some of them I can't even find photos of them, like for the ones that I found. So let me just show you some photos. Let's see here.
Excellent.
So can you see it?
Yeah, I see a little brown reddish beetle.
Yeah, so this is called a copris, a gopher tortoise copris beetle. And so this is a macro lens, but they're about, 4 millimeters, maybe a little bit larger than that. But they're just super cute. They have this tiny little horn. And this is an animal that feeds on gopher tortoise feces, and they lay their eggs in it. And so they are fully reliant. They would not be here if it wasn't for gopher tortoises. And this is one that upon like learning about it and reading about it, there was one scientist back in 1894. His name is Henry Hubbard. He had recorded these as like the most common invertebrate gopher tortoise commensal animal. So he had recorded upwards of 84 beetles in one burrow, and he found them more frequently than any other animal. And since then, it's been really difficult for people to find them. There's 2 people that I know of that are studying insects in gopher tortoise burrows, Dr. Dayrup with Archbold Biological Station. He's in South Florida. And then Dave Almquist, who is with the Florida Natural Areas Inventories. I hope I got that right, FNAI. And he also was looking for these insects, and he didn't find, he thinks he maybe found a partial specimen, but he couldn't positively confirm. And Dr. Dayrup has also spent years looking for this one and was never able to record it either. So I actually was able to record it at 3 out of my 6 field sites, and that was really exciting. Like, I actually found quite a number of them. And so it's just, you know, we've thought that it's been in decline for a long time. It probably is in decline, but it was really exciting to be like, actually, they're still here. And I did find them, and I found quite a bit of them.
Okay.
And then this guy is the little gopher tortoise scarab beetle, super teeny tiny, 2 millimeters. Identifying this guy, he looks really similar to a lot of other types of scarab beetles. And but there's only one of this kind of beetle that like lives in gopher tortoise burrows. And being able to distinguish it from the one that doesn't live in gopher tortoise burrows, you have to like measure this this tiny little spike on its leg to confirm that it is specific to gopher tortoises. So that was really difficult in identification.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. This guy is a moth. So there's a number of moths that are also dependent on gopher tortoises. And this one had only been found in Putnam County in Florida, one county in North Florida. Again, my project was in South Florida, and I was able to find these also in several gopher tortoise burrows. So that was really exciting. And then this is a really common fly that also eats gopher tortoise poop and lays its eggs and fully dependent, but they're really common. And so they're just like a fly that hangs out at the entrance of burrows. And one animal, the gopher frog, is a frog that relies on gopher tortoises also. They live in gopher tortoise burrows. And this is a favorite food source for the gopher frog. So it's just really interesting how like everything's really connected. So I also wanted to show you one more, and this is another kind of moth that doesn't actually live in gopher tortoise burrows, but they are dependent on gopher tortoises. So this is a gopher tortoise shell. It's a dead gopher tortoise. And this, you can see like little tunnels of sand on top of the shell. So this is from a moth that eats the keratin off of gopher tortoise shells. So they call it like the moth that recycles gopher tortoises. And they're fully dependent on gopher tortoises. They have to eat the keratin of gopher tortoises. And they create these tubes. This is probably the most endangered of all of the gopher tortoise invertebrate animals. I didn't find any, unfortunately. I looked really hard and I tried, but I never saw them. So
wow,
pretty exciting. Yeah, it's just really interesting how these animals are so closely linked. You know, there's so many animals that are closely linked with gopher tortoises. And yeah, it's just like trying to wrap my head around that still. Like, I studied this for years, and it's just so amazing to like see how connected the ecosystem is, and you know how all of these animals are just dependent on one being. And so yeah, it's just exciting and also terrifying when you think about, you know, their decline. And so
well, that makes the point
another
well, that makes the point that you were making earlier in the show, which is that we have to protect wild places where these animals are, and not just because we want to save a gopher tortoise, but because there are so many other species that are a part of this great big ecosystem that gopher tortoises create.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. That is exactly the point. It's just impressive to think about. And yeah, I feel like I'm still like mind blown every time I think about it, and like the list of animals that depend on them. We kind of threw out this number, around 360 animals depend on gopher tortoises, but that's far more. And I don't mean necessarily like some of them can survive, like many of them, most of them can survive without gopher tortoises. There are only a select few out of that 360 that are fully dependent on them. But you know, these are animals that are benefiting in some way, and potentially it's increasing their likelihood of staying alive, of, you know, living a longer life. And so it helps them. Like, you know, they might not need a gopher tortoise, but it, you know, it's still important, you know, it's still important for them. So
So tell me a little bit then about the work that you do with Wild Landscapes.
yeah, so as I mentioned, I think just it's really the internship that I had at the zoo that led me to being really interested in gopher tortoises and wanting to protect them and protect their habitats. And my work, my thesis work with gopher tortoises as a master's student is what really inspired me to like really want to be involved in land conservation and protect, you know, wildlife, gopher tortoises definitely, but wildlife in general. And so that's when I started realizing, yeah, I got to get involved in land conservation. This is what I really want to do. And I wasn't really sure that it would happen. I did a lot of looking, and then I kind of just put it out there into the universe, and I announced it on social media that I was looking to work for land conservation. And then that's kind of like where this led. So I just think I got really lucky at the time. The director of Wild Landscapes had been following my professional social media account, and that's kind of how I found Wild Landscapes. And I was like, I gotta get in here. I gotta work for Wild Landscapes. So I worked really hard to get to this point. But yeah, so I feel really lucky in working to protect landscapes in Florida, and in New Hampshire, in Oregon, in India, and in Kenya. So yeah, we're just doing land conservation locally, but also internationally.
Can you tell us about some of the projects that are going on internationally?
Sure, yes. So some of my favorite projects. One of them is we are working in Laikipia, Kenya with Old Pejeta Conservancy. So they're our partner, and they are really at the front lines of this land conservation project. So they're working to create what's called, what we're calling Ukanda wa Vifaru, which is Swahili for rhino corridor. And we are essentially connecting habitats and like little conservancies and ranches, and trying to create a large rhino corridor. And that's going to expand up into a larger protected landscape. So our project is focused on 556,000 acres for rhino corridor, and they need protection. Rhinos are very heavily poached, and so this rhino corridor will be fenced, but it will allow other wildlife like elephants to be able to come through and travel, and it'll restore historical migrations. And so that 556,000 acre corridor is going to connect to the Northern Rangelands Trust. And ultimately, it'll be a total of 7.5 million acres of protected landscapes that are connected. So yeah, that's really exciting. We recently received a fundraise for $1.1 million for Old Pejeta to continue the work with the corridor. And I can show you a map, actually. I have it here, just so you can get an idea, because I think for me, I'm very visual. So let's see here.
That's really impressive. More than $1 million for rhino conservation. Yeah, and I'd imagine it's probably similar to gopher tortoise conservation, where you protect the place, and you're not just saving tortoises or rhinos, you're protecting so much more.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's great because, we have rhinos in mind, but it's also protecting wild dogs and elephants, and just a huge range of wildlife that will be benefiting from this corridor. So this is Old Pejeta, where our partners are based, And we're working on this first phase, which is these 2 ranches. One's Laikipia National Park, but it's actually, so National Park sounds like it might be in really good condition. It's actually one of the landscapes in this area that's not in good condition at all. And so they need some restoration work, and that's another thing that we're working on. And then we're basically just going to continue connecting a lot of these ranches to other conservancies that already do have rhinos. And so the rhinos will be able to travel. So right now, Old Pejeta has, I think, 130 rhinos on their property, in their landscape, and they're hoping to expand it with this rhino corridor. It should expand to over 1,000 rhinos. So right now they're at capacity. They're unable to grow the population anymore. There's just not enough space, and so yeah, so we could go from 130 to over 1,000, which is just really exciting.
Wow, how cool
and
is
then,
that?
In this next map, yeah, and then just so you can get an idea of the landscape, like, it looks like a lot of land. We're talking about this small portion at the bottom of the map that's 556,000 acres, but then it's connected to 6.5 million acres of Northern Rangelands Trust. So it's really great to have like all of this connected. So this looks like a lot of land, this brown portion of it. And the only problem though is that there are no rhinos on that property. Or on this landscape. So they're really restricted to the rhino corridor because they're protected here. So there's rangers that are protecting them, and there's this security fencing. So, and it's fencing that rhinos can't get through, but other wildlife can. Yeah, so that's a super exciting project that I'm really excited about. It's going to take a long time, but yeah, landscape conservation is just how it works.
And I guess
and then
I'll
so
remind
our next
everybody watching. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I was going to jump into another project just because I'm getting carried away, but go ahead.
I just wanted to remind everybody watching that here in just a moment, I'm going to start grabbing your questions out of the chat. So go ahead, get those typed up and posted. That way I can grab them there and pose them to Amanda. Since we did get started late, sorry about that. Thanks for your patience. I hope, Amanda, it's okay if we go a few minutes over, but we'll try to keep it to time too.
Of course, yeah.
We won't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I read this all day.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So our India project is really similar to the one in Africa. I guess same idea, but it's connecting Bhutan to Burma, and so we're also working with community conservancies and local natives in their villages to connect those landscapes. And we've partnered with a grassroots organization there in India named Urunyak. And so they are, the ones at the front lines, and we're just offering support and helping them fundraise for that corridor. So those are our 2 major international projects that I'm really excited about.
That's brilliant stuff. Excellent work. I'm glad you're out there doing it. I'm glad there's smart, passionate people taking on these big conservation challenges.
Thank you. And there's a lot, I think now being in the field, there's a lot of people that are doing the same thing, doing very similar things. And so it's inspiring. It's really, really exciting. The work, day in and day out kind of work is a lot of office work. It's very little field work, but the reward is really great. So it's very high reward.
All right. Well, let's see what folks in the chat are thinking about. I'm going to see what questions they've got. Folks, don't forget, you can still post questions if you've got some. And I'm going to start with one from Laura Beth, who writes, I've heard that golf courses are a threat to gopher tortoises, both for habitat loss and golf balls littering their burrows. Is that true?
I think, yeah, well, absolutely with habitat loss, it's just another form of development. So that is definitely an issue. And as far as golf balls inside of gopher tortoise burrows, I've actually never seen one. I'm sure it sounds like, especially being in Florida where golf courses are very common, I could definitely see that happening. I think it would probably be like lower on the list of concerns as far as conservation for gopher tortoises go.
Let's see, we've got another viewer who's curious about how to repair tortoise shells. They write, we try to fix our box turtles when they get hurt in our neighborhood from cars or dogs. Is there a surefire way to put a turtle back together?
Yeah, it's so sad because it's such a common thing to come across in Florida, especially when it's warm out, summertime. Gopher tortoises are active, box turtles are active, and there is no surefire way. I would not recommend doing it on your own. I would definitely recommend sending it to a rehabber. Just everything from pain medications to antibiotics, and just like the proper materials. I know that in some cases they've used just different materials to like put the shells back together and let them over time heal, because it's bone. And so it takes time for it to eventually heal. But yeah, not something I could do on my own. I would definitely recommend finding a local rehabber.
Excellent advice. Let's see. Next one. Do gopher tortoises stay in one burrow their entire life?
Really good question. So no, they do stay in the same location region, but they do create multiple burrows. And so they might actually be even using a summer home and a winter home, or wet season, dry season home. So they might be moving even from day to day, week to week, season to season, but they do tend to have multiple burrows, and they go back and forth, especially the males. If they have other females around that they're interested in, they will create burrows closer to the females. And so they might have multiple females that they're courting and multiple homes to hang out with them.
One of my longtime viewers, Erla, is curious about gopher tortoise conservation. Do you have gopher tortoise wardens, volunteers who keep an eye on specific tortoises and report any issues?
I love that. That's a really great question. And I personally don't, I don't really know if that's something that has ever, I'm not sure. I think if they're interested in getting involved, I would recommend, maybe if they're in Florida, reaching out to the Gopher Tortoise Council and, seeing if there's a way to get involved. But yeah, I think that's great. If you are interested in keeping an eye on them, I think we need more of that. So that's awesome.
There you go. There's got to be some way to get involved, right?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
All right. The next
FWC
one here.
is another one.
Sorry, say that again.
So I think the two places would be Florida Fish and Wildlife. They also work with gopher tortoises, and then the Gopher Tortoise Council so that I would recommend reaching out to those two if they're interested.
There we go. All right. The next question, kind of similar actually. Does WildLandscapes use volunteers?
So we don't do a lot of field work. So I think it just depends on what you're interested in doing. It really just, we're mostly working in the office. So if you're interested in helping, I'm sure that we could definitely find something for you to do, but just be aware that it's office work. So I don't want you to be a little like deceived. I don't want to bring you in to be like, we're just working on the computer. So I don't know if that's exciting, but I can definitely recommend, if you're interested in doing field work, I can help out with recommending some other things.
It's kind of like doing museum work.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, I'm on Zoom most of the day, and mostly writing grants and that sort of fun stuff. So
they can, I'm sure there's plenty of ways. Okay, let's see. The next two things that have popped up here in the chat, maybe you'll know what this means. They want to see pictures of banshee. Does that make
Banshee
sense?
is my sulcata tortoise. Yeah, so I
Oh,
have
okay.
a
Oh, perfect.
I love it. I have a childhood tortoise that I grew up with. I got him when I was 12, and not a great story. I don't recommend buying a sulcata tortoise. I don't recommend them as pets, but needless to say, he is a family pet, and he is here to stay. And he's been with me for a couple decades. So I have a little video of him. This is his bowling ball. He's loves playing with his bowling balls, and we here we go. Yeah.
Oh, look at Banshee
So
go.
he's yeah, he's a sweetheart. I have so much I could say about him. He's a great animal, but also just not a great pet. It's been a challenge over the years. He's grown. He's over 125 pounds now, and
Oh my
we have
gosh.
put him on over an acre of land. But previously, this is just in the last year, he moved into an acre paddock with me. But previously he was with my parents, and it was just getting too big for his habitat that he was in. And so I feel lucky that he's actually still with me, because I was really concerned and I thought that I'd have to rehome him, but he's still here. So.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great stuff. Amanda, thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
This has been great, learning about gopher tortoises, their friends, and what they need to survive, and a little bit about what it takes to protect wild spaces so that all the critters, from 2 millimeter dung beetles all the way up to the great gopher tortoises, can continue to thrive and survive out there where they belong.
I love that sentiment. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate the invite, and I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about insects and tortoises. So thank you.
Maybe we'll put you on the annual Reptile and Amphibian Days schedule. We could check in about gopher tortoises and conservation.
I love that.
Next year too. Maybe next year we'll actually bring you to Raleigh in person for the real big event, for the real thing.
That. Yes. And meet the gopher tortoises at the museum, right?
Absolutely. Can definitely arrange for that. I hear they're awesome. just great tortoises. They're good friends. They love hanging out at the museum. So I'm told.
Yes.
All right. Well, hey, everybody out there. Thanks for tuning in tonight to Science Tonight. Hope that you enjoyed the program. We will, of course, be back here next Thursday, 7 o'clock, for another episode. Next week, we'll be talking with neuroscientist at NC State University, John Meitzen. We're going to be taking a tour of the brain. You won't want to miss it, because he will have an actual human brain for that tour. So make sure you mark your calendars, subscribe to the museum's YouTube channel, check out naturalsciences.org to see more programs that are coming up. And of course, don't miss the rest of Reptile and Amphibian Days happening tomorrow and Saturday. If you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening out of the museum, of course, you can follow us on social media. We're at Natural Sciences on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And before we go, Amanda, how can people keep up with you and the work that you're doing?
I would love that. So I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Biophilia Amanda, all one word.
I will put that into the chat on the YouTube just to be safe.
Perfect.
Just like that. Everybody, take care. Stay safe, keep your community safe. Amanda, this was fabulous. Thank you once again. And good night, everybody.
Good night.